So the first thing is to ask the question of, what is stress? What are we talking about when we talk about stress? And it really is, as you imagine, it really is a very, very generalized term that describes any kind of feeling of emotional strain or pressure. It's not usually, but it's felt obviously within the body. It's a physiological experience that we interpret psychologically. It's also referred to as a type of psychological pain or mental suffering, which means that we just know innately. We just know that this discomfort, this feelings and sensations and tension that we're feeling in our body isn't sort of created by anything on the outside. It's not like getting cut by a knife or bumping into a doorknob or getting stung by a bee or even a cigarette bite. It's not an external cause, and it's not a pain like the kind of pain you might get when you've got a stomach ache. It's a sort of tension that's experienced throughout the body, and tension is really the right word to start to describe it, because when we think about tension physiologically and the metaphor that we invoke when we use the word tension, even the word stress, we think about something that's being pulled apart. And what happens, though we have a rubber band or we have a piece of string or any other material and we pull it apart, it then becomes tense. And if we continue to pull it, and it's particularly if you ever work with wood or metal or with plastic and you start to bend it, then you can start to see the stress appear in the material. And that really aptly describes what's going on in an internal psychological way in each of us when we experience stress. And we all experience stress. Now, I was thinking I've been on quite a lovely extended break up until doing this webinar, and as I sort of left it a little bit too long to start preparing for the webinar, I started preparing for the webinar, and I just started to feel this tension come into my body. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm doing a webinar on stress, and I'm feeling stressed about doing the webinar. And I'm sort of going, oh gosh, am I going to have time? Is it going to go okay? Am I going to be able to get it right? What's am I doing it right? I don't know. And what could happen if I don't do it right? And I was like, that was really unfamiliar because I'd relaxed so much over the course of a long extended holiday. I was like, oh, that's what stress is, and it just comes in. And what happens is to us is that tension, that kind of expectation of other people, that tension that's created by having something to do and wanting to do it well and being afraid that it won't work out, that things will go badly and that will have consequences, that creates a tension in our body. And the danger is that we get used to that. That becomes normal. I was so aware of it just because I've become so relaxed after my holiday. But within about 4 or 5 weeks, I'll be sort of working, day after day and working to deadlines and being in front of people and working with people in difficult situations and facing my own difficult situations. And that stress will just be kind of become this background level of stress that I'll be carrying with me, potentially right throughout the year. And that has consequences. There's the short-term consequences that we've already identified. There's the discomfort. There's the dis-ease that I have in my body. A psychologist and psychotherapist love to use this kind of broken down version of the word dis-ease, where it really clearly identifies, well, there's ease, which is what I was experiencing just a few days ago, and there's dis-ease, which is what I was experiencing when I started to work on this webinar and the pressures of work started to pick up. There's a sense of a tension that needs to be released, and that tension impacts upon my ability to enjoy life. It impacts upon my ability to engage comfortably in relationships and comfortably in activities and participate in a relaxed and easy way in the life around me. That tension is actually exists. It actually exists in our body, and it creates muscular tension. People are very familiar with neck pain and the discomfort and growing discomfort that you can get in your neck. A lot of people get a lot of neck stiffness, and need to go and seek assistance with that. Tension in the back, tension in the hips and in other parts of the body. Over time, this can lead on to cardiopulmonary conditions because, of course, the tension leads to a constriction in blood vessels and veins. This means that the blood has to pump faster and harder. The heart has to work harder. We often, when we're tense, we don't breathe as fully because we're very tense, and so we breathe at a very shallow level. And while we can survive this in a short period of time, and our body's very good at self-regulating and saying, take a deep breath now, you've hardly been breathing the last 5 minutes. Over time, this does have negative impacts, and it does cause quite serious heart disease and other cardiopulmonary conditions. Also, this perpetual tension in our body, it releases hormones, and in particular, it releases hormones that are in response to a perceived threat. Our mind is creating a scenario, a future scenario, in which it's imagining that things are going to go badly, and it generates a fear response. That one of the easiest ways I think of understanding stress is it's kind of this ongoing low-level fear, a low-level fear about what might happen. What that does, it actually lowers our immune system. It makes us more compromised in terms of colds and flus, and other kinds of diseases that we might come across, which bizarrely in the time of COVID, I think is really interesting. The more stressed we are, potentially the more susceptible we are to diseases. So there's a real incentive to lower stress and mitigate the impacts of stress. So what causes stress? Well, the most obvious cause of stress is life. Life causes stress, and particularly modern life causes stress. It's the events that might occur around us. There might be, I think of things like COVID causing stress, lockdowns cause stress, bushfires cause stress, floods cause stress, car accidents cause stress, and our responsibilities in life also tend to cause us stress. If I'm as a parent and I'm worried about my child, that causes me stress. The higher up you tend to be within management, the more responsibility you tend to have for more and more people, the more stressed you become. But no matter what your role is, you've got a responsibility to fulfill that role. And you know that if you don't fulfill it, then that will have consequences. And the awareness of those consequences of you not fulfilling your responsibilities leads to those feelings of stress. The other component is limited resources, because all of these events and all of these responsibilities wouldn't really be an issue to us if we had unlimited resources. We had all the money in the world, we had all the time in the world, we had all the energy in the world, we had all the people in the world to do what needed to be done. We just get it done. But we don't. The life is pretty much defined by limited resources, and needing to get things done and make things happen and face the world and face our responsibility and face events with the resources that we have at our disposal at any given time. That's worth. So that's the first cause of stress, and in thinking about that, in fact, I'm going to come back to that. I put that slide in the wrong place. So the other cause of stress, which I've alluded to, is the thoughts. And so I'm going to address these separately, because there's the causes of stress, which is the events, the responsibilities, but then there's our thoughts about those events, those responsibilities, and our limited resources. And so if I'm thinking about my life events, if I'm thinking that things are going to happen, something bad is going to happen in the future, there's going to be an earthquake, there's going to be a bushfire, there's going to be a flood, I'm going to be in a car accident, I'm going to go on a plane, I might get COVID in the future. I committed to work to do this particular task, and I've got this responsibility to fulfill it, and it's not happening. I'm procrastinating, or other events are getting in the way, and I'm going to be found to have not fulfilled my responsibilities, and I just don't have enough time. I just don't have enough energy. I'm feeling really tired. I'm falling asleep. Trying to get this thing done late at night, and I start to imagine, oh, well, what if I don't get it done? Who will judge me? What will the consequences be? What might happen? And we often start to think about worst case scenarios. Our mind is quite prepared to go into catastrophic disaster thinking along the what if. So I'm just going to sort of back it up a little bit, because in terms of the life events, what's the antidote to stress? In terms of life events and responsibility, limited resources, how do we overcome that? And that's kind of, in a sense, it's really logical, but we don't always think of it because we can't see the wood for the trees. We're busy going about our daily life. But when you think about it, well, why don't I minimize the impact of events? A classic, I think, example of that is, home insurance. I was actually in a bushfire myself and lost my home, and I was insured. And that significantly reduced the impact of that event upon me because I was able to mitigate those losses. There are some big life events that do tend to create a lot of stress: getting married, getting divorced, having a baby, moving home, buying a new home, traveling overseas, lots of the death of a loved one. If you've got some of these things going on, really work hard to not add another one. Don't try. Don't try and move house and have a baby and get married all in the same few months. But don't take if you're sort of having a baby, don't take on that. Don't go for that new high flying role that's going to create lots of pressure in your life. Just do one little thing at a time. Minimize your responsibilities. Don't try to do too much too soon. And obviously, maximizing resources works. We have a culture of wealth creation, and our culture of wealth creation is designed to minimize stress because the more resources you have at your disposal, the easier it is to manage difficult situations. Resources also includes the amount of energy, your physical health, the relationships around you, the people in your life. So when you maximize your resources, you're more capable of dealing with things when they come. The other thing that you can do, and this leads me to sort of talking about the Uprise modules, which I assume and I think that everybody here will have access to because your organisation has joined up to Uprise. And there's the online modules at uprise.co, and you can also download an app, and it has these modules that teach you how to teach your body and how to teach your mind how to consciously de-stress. And so there's a real physiological component to that. There's a real a mechanism for usually closing your eyes, being aware of your body, and consciously releasing. Psychologists have been using a process known as progressive muscle relaxation for close to 100 years now. And that is literally a process of focusing on each part of your body one bit at a time. And you can have a little go at doing this now, where you kind of squeeze your toes and hold them really tight for about 10 seconds. And then you just let them go and you concentrate and release again. Then you do your whole foot and let it go. And you try and sort of squeeze your ankles and your calves and let it go. And you try and squeeze your knees and let it go. And what it does is it takes that tension in your body that's there unconsciously, and it consciously makes you aware of it one piece at a time and then consciously releases it. So that's known to be effective, as are a range of mindfulness practices that are also taught in the Uprise Act. So that's how you deal with the kind of the physiological effects. In terms of in terms of how you deal with the thinking, the thoughts about future life events, future possible responsibilities, future limited resources, you are actually able to retrain your thinking around that in order to reduce the impact of your own thought processes on your stress levels. So there's a module, and what I'm going to teach you now is very much drawn from the online modules. Sometimes this is known as cognitive restructuring, with the idea being that this can actually quite completely change the way, if you systematically, and this is what psychologists do in their sessions, if you systematically work through negative thought processes, maladaptive thought processes, you can actually end up with a completely different way of thinking and seeing the world and experiencing the world as a person, just by addressing one sort of thought pattern at a time. So I'm going to teach you the basic skill for doing that now. So retraining thinking around stress. So the first thing to do is to kind of identify the thought. And sometimes, you're quite good at going, I can catch that thought. Other times, you're much more aware of the feeling. We tend to be aware of the feeling first. When it comes to stress, It's usually a feeling of tension. You might notice your jaw is clenching, your throat is tight. You might find that your heart is racing, or your brain is rapidly, trying to sort of solve this sort of unsolvable problem, or it's imagining and ruminating about all the worst case scenarios and the disaster and the what if this happens and what if that happens, and oh my gosh, if that happens then that will happen, and just creating this inner storm. I used to joke with my partner when we caught ourselves doing this years ago. We used to call it the nothing terror, because the future doesn't exist. It's just a what if, and yet we can become quite terrified and paralyzed, and rigid, frozen by that terror. You might notice yourself procrastinating. And a good thing to ask yourself is, well, what did I think just before that feeling? Another one is, what am I afraid of? What am I afraid of here? And write it down. Yeah, write it down. Let's see if we can identify some of those thoughts that occur before the feeling starts to escalate. Be brave. Write that thought or write that fear down. Often we in fact, our natural tendency, even though we get preoccupied with our thoughts, our natural tendency is to avoid them, to sort of try and get away from those thoughts, push them away, try and run away from them, somehow distract ourselves. And in social settings, I think, what another webinar I do is on toxic positivity. Sometimes we think that we're supposed to be positive all the time. I've noticed more and more in my sessions with clients that people go, "Oh, I need to be positive." I'm like, "Oh my God, your life's falling apart. Why are you so determined? Oh, well, you need to be positive. You got to keep up a brave face." I'm like, "Well, I'm not so sure that's the best way to go about it." Actually, we know that it's really effective to be brave and to face our fears, and actually to put into words, this is my worst nightmare. This is my worst fear. And the ones here are straight out of the Uprise module. These are common fears that people have about the future. If I can't get this task done, if I don't do this thing, or if I can't, whatever it is, then I'll lose someone important to me. My spouse will break up with me. My child will leave me. My friend won't be my friend anymore. I'll run out of money. If I don't have the job, if I can't get this task done, I'll run out of money and I'll go broke. If people knew this about me, then I'd lose all of my friends and lose all of my family. I might fear that I'll lose my job, or fail my education. I might be terrified of ending up homeless. I might be afraid of being rejected or abandoned. I might be terrified. People are afraid of their feelings. There's like this feeling. It's like, oh no, if I can't deal with this, I'm going to end up permanently depressed, and I'm going to feel hopeless for the rest of my life. And oh my God, imagine that. Imagine feeling this way forever. And then imagine if is coming into it and driving the tension and driving the stress and driving the feelings. Just wanted to remind you that if there's anything coming up for you, if there's anything you wanted to ask about, if there's anything you wanted to sort of comment on thus far, please do use the chat, and I'd love to interact. So once we've written the thought down, once we've got it into words, that's very powerful in and of itself, because it takes something ethereal, this kind of nothing that's floating around in our mental space, and it creates it and it makes it into something. And as human beings, we're much better at dealing with real things that we can see in front of us than we are at dealing with imaginary things. If you try and get hold of an imaginary thing, if you try to grab hold of a thought, it's like smoke. It just sort of whisks away, and like, oh, I'm not even sure what that thought was anymore. But if you can capture it and see it in front of you, suddenly you gain power over it. So ask yourself, what are the costs of thinking this way? And there's lots of costs of thinking that way. You feel bad, you might feel resentful or blame other people, you become unproductive, it's hard to concentrate, you feel like not trying, giving up. You have to hide who you are from other people because it's, there's something not good about you. You're not being positive, you're negative, it's bad in some way. You act in ways that you don't want to. You feel guilty. You procrastinate, which leads to you not actually getting the thing done, which actually kind of, they call it the self-fulfilling prophecy. Like it's your thoughts that drive the reality that then creates the situation that you were terrified of in the first place. You can get angry, grumpy, defensive with other people, treat yourself badly. You feel numb and lifeless, lose confidence, procrastinate. The reason we go into this is to sort of look at the thought and go, this thought is doing this to me. I'm not okay with that. This little thought does this. I need to change this. And so this part of the process is about getting motivation to say, you know what? I'm sick of this kind of thinking. I'm sick of this thought having this kind of control over me. I'm not going to put up with it. I'm going to change it. And we need that motivation to sort of go through with the rest of the process and put that energy towards creating a new way of thinking. First of all, dislodging that old way of thinking and then shifting to a new way of thinking. The next thing is to question the thought around the likelihood of that worst case scenario occurring. Ask yourself, what are the reasons why this worst case scenario, why this prediction that I've come up with about losing my job, losing my friends, being rejected, what's the reason? What's the likelihood this isn't actually going to happen? What are the reasons that it's not likely to happen? The situation will probably change then. Yeah. So it's actually not that likely at all. I love this sort of central Buddhist teaching. There's only one constant in life, and that's change itself. And things are always changing. So this situation will change. New information will come to light. Something will happen, and it won't turn out as badly as I expect. Realistically, the chances of actually losing my house or losing my friends, they're really, really low. It's not actually going to happen. My worst case scenario actually requires a whole series of unfortunate events happening in a row, and one or two of those might happen, but all of them in a row, that's really unlikely. I actually have strengths that I can use. There's actually strengths and skills and resources available to me that I can use, and in particular, I can ask other people for support. There's other people around me who can actually assist me with this. Just reading the comment that these thoughts can drive me to take on more and more and perpetuate the cycle of being overloaded, continuing to say yes and even looking for more tasks to add to my to-do list. Yeah, it's sort of that self-fulfilling prophecy of I'm not usually sorry to say it, but it's like I'm not good enough. I'm not doing enough. I need to do more. I'm going to not be good enough for my role, and so I've got to help. I've got to sort of make sure that I'm proving myself. But what you're doing is creating more and more stress, and it really does need this kind of more realistic appraisal, and particularly if you can find those thoughts, and what are those thoughts that are driving this? Put them down. Go through this process. The next challenge for the thought is to look for exceptions. To go, okay, let's see if we can find a time where I thought like this, but it actually didn't happen. There's heaps of times in your life. There's heaps of times in my life when I expected the worst, and it didn't happen. My fears ever since I was a child, my fears have always been social anxieties that I'll meet someone or I'll go somewhere and that person will just totally reject me. They'll be mean to me. They'll put me down, and it'll be awful. And I can just think, I still will sort of go to a new novel situation and meet people and go, oh God, but actually, if I look back at the amount of times that actually happened in my life, I'm probably down to sort of 1 in 10,000. Yeah, so it just doesn't happen, and those 1 in 10,000, they all happened in high school, and so it's just not going to happen. I remember when I was convinced that a worse situation was going to happen, for example, these times, but it didn't happen. And it didn't happen because, for me, I showed up. I showed up and I smiled and my friend was friendly and I said hi, and people are nice. Yeah, my history has conditioned me to expect people to not be nice, but people are nice. And so, look for the reasons why that thought is very, very unlikely. Think of the time when you thought in a similar way and actually things didn't turn out that way. And then ask yourself, okay, given that, given that past experience, And, like I just said, out of the 10,000 times I've been terrified of something bad happening, in a social setting, is 1 out of 10,000. So how likely is it this current situation isn't going to turn out as badly as I expect? Well, it's really likely. It's not going to turn out as badly as I expect. So challenge that thinking. Yeah, and no, that's sleep is a big one. And Claire, sleep is a big one. Yeah, and stress, stress and sleep in this kind of dance with one another. Sleep, the more sleep we get, the more relaxed we are physiologically, and the less impact that stress will have on us. Whereas the more stressed we are, unfortunately, those racing thoughts and the tension in our body, and it's all a vicious cycle. So the thoughts lead to tension in our body. The tension in our body causes us to look at our body and go, "Oh, hang on a second. There's tension in my body. I must be frightened of something." And the brain goes, "Oh, what is it? What am I frightened of? What am I frightened of?" And it's racing around trying to find what it's frightened of. And while it's racing around trying to find what it's frightened of, it's not falling asleep. And you're there going, "I'm not falling asleep. I need to fall asleep. If I don't fall asleep, I'm not going to be rested for tomorrow." And the body starts getting tense. And the brain goes, "Oh, the body's tense. There must be something wrong. What's going on?" And we get caught in this loop. And so a lot of it, particularly that progressive muscle relaxation, mindfulness, meditation activities are all about saying, "Okay, mind, chill, body, relax. Mind, stop it. Don't go chasing rainbows. Don't go looking for the serpent. Don't go looking for the bad thing that might happen." Okay. Yeah, lists are great, Dan. And people used to, I write to-do lists, and I suffer from this. You write a to-do list, and then I do the things on the to-do list, and then because it's all on the screener, I delete the top of I delete, and you get to the end of the day, and what's on your to-do list? Nothing. And so increasingly, particularly if you use apps and things, we end up with a done list. Much more healthy, and you end up much happier if you can look at your done list and go, "Oh, there's all the things I've done." All right. So the next step in the process, having challenged that thought and challenged its likelihood, is to come up with a new, more true, more helpful thought. Sometimes I procrastinate. I work hard, get the job done. There's a lot to do, but I can only do one thing at a time. I've done it before. I can do it again. I am enough. I'm okay. I always do my best. I'm doing the best I can with the resources that I have. I can do this if I set my mind to it. This is a setback, but I can keep on going. I often teach clients to begin sentences in their mind with the word "I want." So to shift from looking for where things are going to go wrong, to shift from what if, to shift from what they're frightened of, to what do I want? What outcome do I actually want? And it creates this real psychological shift into, what do I want? Well, I want this to work out as well as possible. Okay, what do I need for things to work out as well as possible? And we become much more pragmatic and practical. Okay, so we're running out of time today, so I need to finish up. This is the final slide. Key takeaways from today: life can be stressful. That's okay. Yeah, life is full of stresses. That's the nature of human existence. Minimize life stresses where you can. Don't take on too much at once. I didn't cover this one as much, but nutrition, exercise, sleep, human connection, mindfulness, they are your top 5. Really just cover those. I was chatting to a fellow today who's in a really difficult situation, and I said, "Look, you know what? How are you eating?" "Oh, eating really bad." "Start eating well." "You're exercising?" "Not exercising." "Go for a walk." Yeah. Sweat. Um, uh, Sleep as best you can. Connect. Who can you connect with? Family. You go connect with family. Can you practice some mindfulness? Yeah, you go for a walk along the beach and just focus on the sound of the birds and the waves. Great. Do that. That will begin to reduce the stress. We know that now that thoughts can create more stress than is necessary. So then retrain your thoughts to relieve rather than create your stress.